Music education at the elementary level is an effective and important way for us to enculturate children and students, especially at that age. Alan Merriam writes a lot about how music education and music in general is a way where we can allow students to emotionally express themselves and be creative in ways that we don't always get to reach in other subject areas. So, for example, some of the things that I would do in my music classroom is we would be talking about musical concepts, and some fundamental concepts would be phrasing and dynamic shaping. And those are just some ways that we can allow students to express themselves emotionally. We would also do some composing together, a lot of playing together, and really just working together. Right? Alan Merriam writes about collaboration and how music and music education is able to achieve that. And so I think that's one of the most important things is that we're doing things together as a group and as a team. So music has a lot of physical as well as psychological functions that are especially beneficial to children. I think of music, right? A lot of music makes you move, it makes you groove. So I think of dancing. And that's one way a general music teacher can incorporate some physical movement in their lessons and in their class is dancing, working together or dancing together, dancing in a group, dancing with a partner. You get a lot of physical movement that way. And then psychological, I go back to thinking about dynamic shaping and phrasing. That's one way we really feel emotion. And that's one of the things that I feel like most people, and the reason why I do, and the reason why any of my music teachers do music for a living is because of the way it makes us feel. So in preparation, that's when we're getting ready to teach the students what concept we are about to teach them. So it's generally unconscious. We're going to be showing them a new concept unconsciously, usually in the warm-up, and then we'll move on to the presentation phase, and that's when we begin to actively show students what we are going to be teaching them, and then we teach it to them. We do this in several different ways. We use presentation slides if we need to, listening, playing, presenting for the students, doing it for them, and then we go into practice, which we begin to take hands off as the educator and see students to start to let them fly on their own, seeing how they do on their own on that. And then we offer feedback if needed, do whatever we can, present it in a different way if needed to help them understand the concept more. And then we begin to wrap things up by the assessment phase. And that's when we are pretty much completely hands-off. We want students to be able to, by then, they're able to see, we want to see how they're able to do things on their own and how well they've retained information. So we're going to assess them, and we're going to offer feedback again after that. This is usually a concert at the end of the year or some small performance, whether if it's for the week, we'll just do a performance for the class, or if it's maybe something we've been working on. In regards to assessment, I touched on that a little bit, but again, we can do concerts at the end of the year, small little performances for each other, for the class, as well as we can also do some testing. Maybe we worked on some small theory or rhythm theory this past week, and we can do flashcards or do some type of multiple choice or something to assess the students. One that I absolutely love to do is using students to assess each other, and that way we create this grand trio of learning, right, where we have me administering and assessing the student, but then we have another student assessing that student, and then this student is able to learn, and then this student's able to learn too, and it's almost more effective because they hear it from another voice. Maybe wouldn't be doing so much of that at the elementary level, but certainly at a high school level, at a middle school level, and still applicable for elementary as well, though. Now, for inclusion in the classroom, this was also one of Pestalozzi's beliefs in his pedagogy, and I think that's probably one, if not the most important thing of any classroom, really, because we first need to be inclusive of each other and allow students to feel like they're included in the classroom before we can even start teaching. That's an ultimate first. Because if you think about it, right, we want students to to feel like they're included, and when they feel like they're included, they feel comfortable, and when we're comfortable enough to make mistakes, and that's how we learn, right? In terms of providing accommodation, I think of Williamsburg with my co-op. We had a student that required accommodation for moving around the room, and he needed like a wheelchair device to be able to move around the room, and that's one thing that I think of right away. There's a visual difference, right? No other student in the classroom needs that to get around. So I want to do everything I can immediately, because there is already a visual difference that puts the student, sets them apart from each other. So one example is making sure the student is able to get around, right? If I can, or maybe another student can get through one space here, doesn't mean that this other student with that accommodation will be able to. So in that instance, I would make sure that there is always open space. The student can get to anywhere that they need to get to, right? We shouldn't need to, during class, you can't get there, let me move this away from you. No, it should already just be there for him. We don't want to draw any more attention to any student that sticks out if they already do. I think in that example, there are some instances where it may be more difficult to implement accommodations, just because we need to almost change the overall classroom and the facility of the classroom to do that. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but that may be something that's a bit more difficult. In terms of accommodations that may be easier to implement, first thing I think of is race and differences in how we look, gender, or anything like that. And I say that it's easy because day one, we set the rules, right? Our differences in race does not mean that we treat one person different than another. So setting ground rules, we respect each other because we are all students and we're all learners, right? Not because one person looks one way and another person looks another way. There are 3 pedagogies that a general music teacher are going to become very familiar with. The first one is going to be Kodai, the Kodai method, and that was designed by Zoltán Kodály. And he was a Hungarian composer, ethnomusicologist, pedagogue, and the Kodály method really focuses a lot on the students and children's natural want to play, and the idea of imitation and having fun and just playing. And then we have Orff, which was designed by Karl Orff. Karl Orff was a German composer, wrote a lot of pieces, and he developed what would become known as Orff Schulwerk, and that means schoolwork. So he designed that to distinguish his professional works from his schoolwork that were designed more for learning for students and for music education. The Orff method is great for our kinesthetic learners. We have things like the Orff marimbas and shakers and tambourines, hand drums, things like that. And I say kinesthetic because we were able to use these, right? We're able to use our kinesthetics. And then finally we have the Dalcroze method. Emil Dalcroze was a Swiss composer and lived the late 1800s to early 1900s. And the Dalcroze eurythmics really focuses on a lot of movement. believe that everyone has a sense of natural movement, dancing, flowing, marching, those types of things. So Eurythmics focuses on just that, movement and dance. And then we also will look at ear training, doing some solfege work and aural skills, and then we also have improvisation, which really brings out that creative aspect once again. How can creativity be used in each of the three methods? Well, Dalcroze, of course, we have improvisation, and I can almost even combine them all into one answer. With the Dalcroze method, we can use improvisation. Maybe I set simple chord progression, 1 5 1 4 5, very simple. Put that on. I say here's our chord progression, and then have some students hop on some orff instruments. Maybe some students play accompaniment, play some chords, 1 5 1 5 4 5, whatever the chord progression I choose, and then the students can improv over that. Maybe we take away the bars that we won't use in our key and in our chords, and then so that's kind of orff and Dalcroze in one. For Kodai, we can use our voices as well to sing and be creative and improvise over that. So maybe that's one way we can use creativity that almost encompasses a little bit of each method as well. If I was observing a first grade music classroom, some things I would be looking for would be the use of our solfege and our hand signs, so do, re, do, things like that, as well as the rhythmic side of it, which would be sokkatu and our takadimi. And the reason for that is at first grade and at that level, we really want to be developing the fundamental concepts of music for students that we're then able to build upon years later or even later down that same year. And for repertoire, I would be looking for probably more simple music that would help guide those functions so that students are able to learn from. If I was observing a second grade music classroom using the Dalcroze method, I would again still be looking for that ear training. We still want to be developing that, and maybe even still using those hand signs as well. In the Dalcroze method, the Dalcroze Eurythmics focuses a lot more on movement and dancing, so of course I'm going to be looking for that as well. Use of rhythm and how we use music and use rhythm in dancing, and then bringing it back to the classroom, the fundamental reason why we're in the classroom, which is to learn, and how we use these things to learn and develop our musical skills for second graders. In terms of repertoire, I would be looking for more dancey, up-tempo type music. So far in this past year, in my experience, that I've seen a lot of Irish music and a lot of jig type music. It's great music to dance to. It's great music to move to, and students recognize it fairly fast as well, which is awesome. That's great. I would personally want to incorporate some march type music, get students to march around the room, be creative that way. If I was teaching my 5th grade class, the Yellow Submarine, using the orff method, I think I would first start with the main melody. I think that's a good place to start for 5th graders. So we would start by maybe listening to the song, singing along with it, singing on our own, or I could teach them just the melody without listening to it first. From there, we would probably have some students playing on orff instruments, playing the melody. Maybe that could be the first week. We all focus on that, playing the melody. That next week after that, we can start doing some harmony. Maybe add the bass line, add the harmonies that are underneath the melody. Maybe have half of the room playing the melody on orff instruments, on orff marimbas, and then have the other half playing the accompaniment on orff marimbas. So that's that week. And then maybe at the end of that week or the start of the next week, start introducing other instruments. If we remember the philosophy of the orff method, It's that it's the idea that all students are fully capable of being musically imaginative and creative. So I want to embody that and I want to embrace that. So thinking of our orchestra right now, we have students playing the melody, maybe singing the melody, and then we have some students playing on the accompaniment, on the same Orff instruments, the Orff marimbas or Orff vibraphones, any of those barred instruments. But now I want to add some percussion to that, right? So we're going to bring out the shakers, we're going to bring out the hand drums, we're going to bring out anything that we can use percussively, and maybe I will have pick out a couple students to play some ideas they have. Maybe I'll show them some ideas first, have the room of barred instruments begin playing the melody and the accompaniment. I'll show them a couple things. We all live in the yellow submarine. We all live in the yellow submarine. Things like that. Now I'll have some students show, hey, what are some ideas you have? And then we'll start looping that, right? We have the accompaniment going, we have the melody going, and then we have students coming in and out of, maybe you hop in the circle and you play a little solo on your Orff instrument for 4 beats, for 1 measure or 2 measures. Then you hop out, next student hops in, tags in another person. And of course I'll have a rotation of students. If you played on percussion this round, next round, switch it up, find someone on an Orff instrument, on an Orff marimba, switch with them, and then we'll all get a chance at doing that. Engaged listening is something that's very important to music, as well as music education. I think it should actually be used more in middle schools, high schools, even in colleges. I feel like it's underused. Engaged listening is. So there are a few steps to effective engaged listening and teaching engaged listening, or teaching using engaged listening. The first one would be preparation. So just like our lesson plan format, we want to almost subconsciously introduce what the new concepts are going to be to students, and then we would have listening. So now we would actually play whatever we're about to listen to. Not the entire thing though. We just want to introduce the music. We just want enough just to introduce it. And then we're going to participate. We're going to talk a little bit about what we heard. Students at this age are great observers actually, and they would love to talk and love to tell us what they heard. Sometimes even more than what we expect them to answer, which is awesome, which is great. And then we're gonna ask some questions. We're gonna ask some more questions about what we heard, and then start guiding students to where we want them to be and what we want them to hear and what them to listen and learn about by the end of the lesson. So we'll ask them some questions, guide them to that, prompt them, and then we'll say, hey, let's listen for that now. Listen to it again. Listen to the piece again, maybe a little bit longer excerpt, maybe a different excerpt, maybe the same excerpt. And then we will stop and we'll do the same thing. We'll re-engage again. Ask, okay, did you hear that? Did you not hear that? What new did you hear differently this time? All those types of things. So let's put all that into an example. If I was teaching a 2nd grade class and I was teaching them the concept of dynamics, I guess let's use John Philip Sousa and let's use Stars and Stripes for lots of dynamic contrast in that one. So first, I would get students engaged on the march. So maybe we would start our warm-up that day with some marching, right? Maybe not Sousa, maybe a different Sousa piece, but I just want us to march around the room, maybe clap the beat, things like that. Let's get us moving. Let's get our ears set to what a march sounds like, and then I would say, okay, let's come back. Let's listen to another Sousa piece, or let's listen to a Sousa piece, and we'll listen to some of the opening of Stars and Stripes, and 30-40 seconds, and we'll stop it there. Ask them what they hear. What instruments did you hear? We'll hear some drums, we'll hear some tubas, we'll hear some crash cymbals, bass drum, snare drum. So maybe I'll ask them, okay, what instruments do we generally associate with loud dynamics? Crash cymbal, bass drum, snare drum, maybe tuba. And what instruments do we associate with not so loud dynamics? We'll see what they come up with. Maybe I would expect woodwind instruments, piccolo, things like that. And then now we'll go into, so that was preparation and that was listening for the first time. And then now we would go into, and then we went into participate. And then now we would go back, okay, let's listen a little longer, and I want you to listen for if anything changes with dynamics. Now everyone's ready listening for that. And we'll get to some loud parts, get to some soft parts, and we'll stop there, and they'll all be like, oh, I hear it, I saw it, I heard it, which is great. We want that. We want them to be excited, we want them to be able to recognize those things. That's why they're excited. So then we would go into our next reconnect, and we would ask more questions about that. Okay, we noticed the differences between loud and soft. Great, awesome. And then we would listen to maybe the entirety of the piece, because there is a lot of it, and maybe we can make a game out of it. Have students raise their hands, or go to one side of the room when it's soft, go to the other side of the room when it's loud, go in the middle of the room when it's somewhere in between. So that's maybe one example I would use to teach dynamics to a second grade class. Another example, if I had a fourth grade class that I was teaching, and my objective concept would be rondo form, warm-up that day maybe would be, maybe I'm playing something on tempo blocks, and I say, hey, have a dance ready for me playing when I play this. And then they have a dance. Maybe it's something as simple as this. I'll give them an example. When I switch up the pattern, have another dance ready. Switch to your second dance. Switch it on them. Go back to A. Go back to the original one. And then maybe the C, I surprise them with it. I don't tell them right away, and I start playing something completely different. And they realize that it's different, but it's completely different overall from anything I've ever played from that pattern. So now they find C, and then I go back to A, E, and A. So maybe that could be a warm-up that day. Now, I say, okay, let's sit down, we're going to listen to some music. We're going to listen to a rondo. Maybe I don't say that, but I start mapping out the ABACA for them. This was what we did today with the dance. That could be the preparation phase, okay? So then now we're going to listen. I play some music for them. Play just a little bit, again, of a rondo. Maybe I use Marcha Radetzky, what we worked on last week for Music Ed 250. And then we listen to it a little bit. I asked them, hey, what do you hear? What instruments do you hear? Do we notice anything similar to the form, maybe, or maybe something similar to some repeats that come back? And then we have a listen again. Listen to those things, and I want you to listen for some things that repeat if anything comes back more than once. Okay, and we start listening to it. So that was we did listen and identify. Then we did some question. Now we're listening. We're listening once again. We listen. And we listen more in depth. We look for some patterns of what we see, some things that come back, and then I ask them again, what do we hear about what repeats? And maybe we begin developing a form. We begin mapping it out. Maybe I write it on the board. Hey, this is similar to what we did this for our warm-up, right? Very similar pattern, very similar form. And then finally we would wrap it up by defining the form. Another activity that I could do is, as we're listening, maybe after all of that, let's play a little game now. See if we can find the form on our own. And I'll pass out playing cards, like poker cards, regular playing cards, and everyone has their card in front of them. We're sitting down, we're listening. And I want you to listen. So now we've determined that this part is the A section. We've determined that this is the B and this is the C. And I want you to listen. Okay, have your card face down in front of you, and when it's in the when A section is happening, I want your card to be flipped over. So it starts with A, so they're going to flip it over. And then I say, they're going to flip it over once we start. And then I say, when you hear B, I want you to turn your card and flip it over to the blank side. So when it's A, have it on the face side. When it's B, have it on the back side of the card. And then when you hear C, turn your card sideways to indicate C. And that could be another activity, another game that we could do to work on our rondo concept.